So today's video is brought to you by a donation from Ancient Melanin. He wanted to know, where do white people come from? Now, there have been many theories out there, such as the out of Africa theory. Then we have the Nation of Islam's theory that white people and Jews were created by an evil scientist called Yaqub. Even the Nuwabians have a belief that the white race was created as a race of killers to serve blacks as a slave army. Now, I don't subscribe to any of these theories, but one thing is for sure, even so-called white people have admitted they're not human. Now, before I answer the question, where do white people come from, we first have to look at some very significant differences between Caucasians and Aboriginals, such as so-called African and the so-called Native American. Now, Caucasians have a sulfur-based anatomy. Look at this article. It says, melanated skin is made of selenium-enriched melanin. Pale skin is made of a variated sulfurous type of melanin. Thus, whereas the skin of so-called black people consists of selenium, the so-called white people have skins with sulfur. Keep in mind that selenium is a superconductor, while sulfur is a very poor conductor. Now, being that pale skin have a sulfur-based anatomy, while melanated skin have a selenium-based anatomy, do the races smell differently? The answer is yes. This article asks the question, do the races smell differently? Yes, they do. It says, a relative told me that many whites say that blacks smell bad. He even said that they are called stink bugs by some Hispanics here in California. I said that I had been around blacks most of my life, including having black girlfriends, black best friends, who I hung out with every day, and teaching whole classes full of blacks every day for months on end, and I never noticed it. It's not really known what blacks smell like to those who say they are stinkers. Some say they smell like sweat or onions, but a lot say that they just flat out stink, period. There is also evidence that Northeast Asians find the odor of blacks particularly offensive, perhaps more so than whites do. Asians also say that we whites stink too, but not as much as blacks do. They often say that we smell like red meat. Some of this may have to do with diet. But one white Vietnam vet said that Vietnamese could hardly smell blacks at all, but could smell a white a block away. Even Hispanics are said to be stinky by some whites. In this article, it says, on Wednesday, September the 20th, 2006, in his poignant address to the United Nations, Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez likened former President George Bush to the devil. The devil came here yesterday, referring to Bush, who addressed the world body during his Tuesday address. Chavez said, and it smells of sulfur still today. On Yahoo Answers, they asked the question, why do white people smell like dogs when they get wet? This article says white people have less melanin and their melanin has sulfur in it, while black people's melanin has selenium in it. Here's a YouTuber asking the question, why do white people smell like a wet dog? On the website BuzzFeed, they asked for the top 20 things white people smell like. The number one is white people stink be smelling like old cabbage and hippo farts. Number two is white people stink. Yeah, that's kind of true. They smell like sauteed onions. On this forum, one user states that they recently read the book, It's the Little Things, the Everyday Interactions That Get Under the Skin of Blacks and Whites by Lena Williams. In it, she said that white people with wet hair often smell like wet dogs to black people, and that black people often smell like sour milk to white people. I have never heard this. When I lived in Memphis, almost all my friends and co-workers were black. We joked about interracial quirks and friction, and smell was never mentioned. I have never been reminded of sour milk by a black person's smell. However, it seems that many people do experience this phenomenon. Why do you think someone might have a certain aroma to a person of a different race? How often does this happen? I once heard that Westerners smell bad to Asians because of all the meat in our diet, which makes sense. Now here's that book, It's the Little Things, the Everyday Interactions That Get Under the Skin of Blacks and Whites. And then we have the book, Why Do White People Smell Like Wet Dogs When They Come Out of the Rain? Now let's talk about the Neanderthal DNA. In this section, I'm going to talk about the fact that only Europeans and Asians have Neanderthal DNA, while melanated people do not. This article is titled, DNA Proof of Racial Differences, More Facts Come to Light. It says here, the fact that modern Europeans are part Neanderthal explains racial differences. Black Africans have no DNA from Neanderthals. It appears that Australian Aborigines do not have any Neanderthal DNA either, so they are also archaic Homo sapiens from Africa. DailyMail.com states Europeans are closer to Neanderthals than Africans are. Discovery News states all non-Africans part Neanderthal, genetics confirm. International Business Times states Neanderthal DNA by race. Asians have closer link from multiple breeding events, studies say. They go on to say that if your heritage is non-African, you are part Neanderthal, according to a new study in the July issue of Molecular Biology and Evolution. Now let's talk about the Rh negative blood. Now in this section, I'm going to be speaking about the fact that the majority of Europeans have Rh negative blood, especially your celebrities, your politicians, and oligarchs, while on the other hand, less than 1% of people of African descent have Rh negative blood. Now Rh stands for rhesus monkey factor, and the rhesus is a very small monkey from India that has managed to get his DNA directly into 93% of all living humans on planet Earth. Then we have blood types. We have type O, type A, type B, and type AB. Now, type O can donate to type O, A, B, as well as AB. But there's only one blood type that can donate to type O, and that's type O. So this is really strange because I've always been told that we're all the same, we're all human, we all have the same common ancestor. Well, how do you explain this? How do you explain the fact that we don't have the same blood type? Now, the American Indians are virtually all type O. We're talking about the Bororo Indians from Brazil, the Inca Indians from Peru, the Champagne Indians from India. Now, people with type O blood need to eat animal proteins, whereas people with other blood types are recommended to be vegetarian. Now, here are some traits of people that have Rh negative blood. They usually have an extra vertebrae, supposedly higher than average IQ. They have more sensitive vision and other senses. They have a lower body temperature, higher blood pressure, increased occurrences of psychic and intuitive abilities. They predominantly have blue, green, or hazel eyes. Sometimes they have reddish hair. They have an increased sensitivity to heat and sunlight, and they're always victims of alien abduction. And now here we have a list of people with Rh negative blood type. And what do you know? At the top of the list, we have Barack Obama, blood type AB negative. As I stated before, less than 1% of people of African descent are Rh negative, right? And then we have this long list of people like Dan Aykroyd, Charlie Chaplin, and Tom Cruise. And of course we have Johnny Depp and Nicolas Cage, who got their eye teeth removed. We'll speak about that at a later date. Now, moving forward, we have our buddy Queen Elizabeth with blood type O negative, and all the celebrities that are related to her. Wow. Angelina Jolie, Brad Pitt, Hilary Duff, and the list goes on. So now let's take a look at some news articles we have beforeitsnews.com stating the mystery of Rh negative blood Genetic origin unknown. Okay, so no solid scientific explanation exists as to how or why Rh negative blood came about. It is presumed to be the result of a random mutation. Have you ever felt that you were weird or different? It may be due to your DNA. 85% of humans have the monkey gene and 15% do not, and maybe have an alien gene instead. Rh negative people are characterized by higher IQs, sensitive vision, lower body temperatures, sensitivity in heat, and the list goes on. Then they continue to talk about the different blood types we discussed, O, A, B, AB, and they state that blood types are further broken down into two groups, which are negative, positive, which is called the Rh factor. Then they claim there is some evidence that suggests the Rh negative blood group may have appeared about 35,000 years ago, and the appearance was regional and seemed to originally be connected with certain groups or tribes of people. Now they state that northern Spain and southern France is where you can find some of the highest concentration of the Rh negative factor in the Basque people. Another original group were the Eastern Oriental Jews. In general, about 40 to 45% of Europeans have the Rh negative group. Only about 3% of African descent and about 1% of Asian or Native American descendant has the Rh negative group. Due to the larger European numbers, it's a safe bet that was where it was introduced into the human genetic code. Could this be also where the Caucasian was introduced? Is the introduction of Caucasian related to the Rh negative blood factor? They continue by saying if the Rh negative factor is a normal presentation of blood, then why is there a problem when a mother of a Rh negative blood group gives birth to a Rh positive blood group baby? This hemolytic disease, actually an allergic reaction, can cause death when the two different blood groups are mingled during pregnancy. When the antigenic substances attack the negative blood group, it can destroy the blood cells. So why does the human body produce antigens to this blood group? Is the blood group alien? Now let's take a look at this article. It says the mystery of the Rh negative blood. Pretty much going to say the same thing, but let's read it anyway. Genetic mapping helps to show that a mutation from Rh positive to Rh negative occurred somewhere in the Basque area of Europe, maybe as much as 40,000 years ago. Now, they go on to say that those with Rh negative blood produce a rabbit serum that agglutinates the red blood cells that are found amongst those with Rh positive blood types. And therefore, one with Rh negative blood cannot receive blood from Rh positive donors. In this regard, that which is an unnatural mutation and genetic defect, Rh negative, cannot receive that which is most natural to human creation, Rh positive. Now let's talk about Vlad the Impaler. Now, Vlad the Impaler was born in Sighisoara, Transylvania, north of Wallachia, which is now modern-day Romania, during the Dark Ages in 1431. Vlad, his father, was a member of the Order of the Dragon, a group who were supposed to protect Christianity. Now, Romania was actually the current-day resurrection of ancient Rome, and the dragon of that order carries with it some serious significance. The name Dracul itself stands for dragon, and young Vlad, being eager to honor his successful father, took on the name of Dracula, which stands for son of the dragon. Side note, the word Drake also means dragon, but I digress. Now, during his short reign of just 6 years, he managed to kill 1 in every 8 people of Transylvania for the very slightest infractions, such as a glance or a single word he didn't like, amassing a kill total of more than 100,000 in just 6 years. This breaks down to about 45 people every day, 7 days a week. Now his dungeons revealed a spawn of terrifying inventions of torture, but in the end of every sentence, the ultimate completion of his enemies' lives were always the same, by ramming a 5-foot diameter sharpened stake up through their ass and out of their chest, neck, or mouth. The grounds of Bran Castle were always strewn with rotting corpses in differing levels of decay on these very tall stakes. Now, besides personally enjoying the entire experience of someone's intensely brutal torture and death, Vlad also drank blood on a regular basis with meals. He also enjoyed very much dipping his bread in warm blood and eating it with his dinner, of which is widely known about the most bloodthirsty ruler of all time in Romanian history. Now, many of the authors down through the years have presented very good evidence that Vlad suffered from porphyria, and by drinking the blood of his victims, he maintained a much greater health, as the copper and iron enzymes fed his tissues with a greater supply of oxygen than his own blood could provide. So compelling is the evidence that the Proceeds of the Royal Society of Medicine published a paper called Porphyria and the Etiology of Werewolves, where they show, due to the lack of medical knowledge in the Middle Ages, legends such as Count Dracula and werewolves were due to this extraordinary condition. They also explain how sunlight is a severe danger to those sufferers, as it can leave a face physically disfigured from very little exposure, explaining why vampires may avoid sunlight. Now, porphyria is a disease that causes the affected person to be oversensitive to sunlight, to be extremely allergic to garlic, and have gums that resemble fangs. It is perhaps the disease that is the basis of the creation of fictional characters that we have come to call vampires. Porphyria is a genetic disorder which is very rare. And here we have Vlad the Impaler. Ain't he a handsome fella? Look at that smile. Look at those dimples. Look at those teeth. So symmetrical. And here again we have Vlad the Impaler just having a little lunch, hanging out with a couple of his friends, drinking a little blood with some bread. Nothing special. And then here we have the family tree. What do you know? They all have the same common ancestor, Vlad the Impaler. Well, I guess that answers everything, right? That answers why they act the way they act. And then we have this article, Prince Charles claims kinship to Vlad the Impaler, helps to save Transylvania's forests. Oh, wow, he cares about nature. He's a humanitarian. He's a good guy, right? And again, Prince Charles here to Dracula's bloodline. The Romanian Tourist Board is to use links between the British royal family and Count Dracula to lure in UK tourists. It has emerged. She cares about animals. What is that? That's a kangaroo? What is that, a wallaby? Who cares? CBS News reports Vlad the Impaler. How is Prince Charles and Queen Elizabeth related to him? Queen Elizabeth related to Vlad the Impaler? Wow. Let's take a look at this section. Just going to talk about when so-called white people emerged on the face of the earth. So-called white man is not, and I repeat, not native to Europe. First, the white man entered Europe around 1200 BC as illiterate horse nomads. They could not and did not begin to record their history until they had absorbed the knowledge of the so-called blacks in Europe, who were the creators of the original European civilization. So I gathered some pictures here just to illustrate, and this is going to tie into my upcoming video called Black Children Inherit Dust. But basically, these are melanated people, indigenous people who have straight hair. So white folks don't have a monopoly on straight hair because they were never on the face of the earth until recently. They just emerged. Okay, they were injected into civilization, if you will. So you had a people of dark complexion with straight hair that they were the first to spread. And here we have a group of melanated people with Asiatic features who also spread across the face of the earth. Again, these group of people transformed, and I have to emphasize transformed, into what you see as Asian people. I'm not going to get into the process of the transformation. I'm going to leave that for my documentary that will be on Patreon. So again, we have Aboriginals, darker skinned Aboriginals with straight hair and African features, and then we had Asiatic melanated people who spread across the face of the earth, also transformed into what we see as Asian. We also have these different type of Aboriginal people, different complexion. Then we have the Dravidians, what you guys call Indians in the US, also not so much Asiatic features, but they do have straight hair, dark complexion. And then we have the albinos, very white skin, light colored eyes, blonde hair, okay? And again, here's another albino child in India. There have been some instances of so-called black people giving birth to albinos. I want to make it very clear, the so-called white people you see here are not really albinos. They are derived perhaps from albinos, but they're not albinos. Again, we're gonna go into where white people come from towards the end of the video, so bear with me. So again, we look at the history of Europe. We see that there was a black Jesus Christ in Europe, okay, painted. We had statues of blackamoors in Europe. It's there still today, right? And we have a black Mary and a black Jesus in Europe. Yeah. So, yeah, we know the history, okay? We know the history. We even had blacks over in Asia, okay? When I say blacks, again, I'm just using that for communication purposes, but we're talking about people with dark complexion, okay? And again, we have a statue of a figure in Cambodia, African features, and another statue in Thailand with African features. So the point of this section is that the entire face of the earth was covered with people with dark complexion. White people were not on the face of the earth. They just arrived recently. So-called black people, so-called Indians, so-called Aboriginals were in Europe, were in Asia. They were all over. Let's get that clear. Now I'm going to elaborate further on this particular topic in my upcoming video called Black Children Inherit Dust. Now let's go into some further research. I want you to get some books that will help you understand further where white people come from. We're going to look at the book Gods of Eden. We're going to have to get the book Everything You Know Is Wrong, Book 1, Human Origins. We're going to also have to get the book Slave Species of the God, The Secret History of the Anunnaki and Their Mission on Earth. Also going to have to look at the book Forbidden Archaeology, The Hidden History of the Human Race. Also going to have to get the book Children of the Matrix, How an Interdimensional Race Has Controlled the World for thousands of years and Still Does. Then we must also get the book Missing 411. Then, of course, The Mysterious Origins of Hybrid Man, Crossbreeding, and the Unexpected Family Tree of Humanity. Also have to get the book, and I mean have to get the book Genesis Revisited. That is a must. You can also check out this video on YouTube by a YouTuber named The Crazy German. He blatantly just came out and said, look, have to admit, white people are not human, okay? And he's a white dude, he's a German. He did 46 videos on just that one topic. Pretty much his entire channel is about white people not being human. So don't have to take my word for it, you can take his word for it. Or if you don't want to take his word for it, you can take it from a college professor that claims that black people are the only race that are 100% pure humans. So again, don't have to take my word for it. I'm a fool, I'm an idiot. You can take it from a college professor. Or you can just look up any of those books that I just named, and the proof is in the pudding. Now, I want you to check out a couple of movies. This movie you have to check out. Dracula Untold. Must watch that video. Then you must check out the movie Rosemary's Baby. And then finally, I want you to check out The Village of the Damned. These white folks are telling you where they came from. They're giving you small portions of their history. Some of it you have to filter out. Even in these books, you have to filter out the misinformation and the rubbish. But within the rubbish is the gem, is what you're looking for. Now, I want to go into my conclusion. Now, before I get into my conclusion, I just want to share a couple passages from 4 of my books, just to show you guys what scholars and professionals are saying. Now, the first book we're going to look at is called Nutricide, and it's written by Dr. Layla Africa. So on page 193, it talks about the development quotient of an African child versus a Caucasian child. So the first row, they're talking about supplemental eating. So for an African child, that would be bananas, yams, squash, and pawpaw. These are alkaline foods, whereas a Caucasian will be eating meat, cereal. These are acidic foods. Now, the next row, it talks about how an African child greets his or her parents versus how a Caucasian child greets his or her parents. So for an African child, that would be the use of musical voice, sounds, clapping the hands, lifting arms, and smiling, whereas a Caucasian child would be mocking the play of wolves, which would be embracing, hugging, which is used to kill a prey, kissing, which is imitating eating a prey, or lapping blood, which would be like tongue kissing. When it comes to toys, African children are using musical, radionic fruits, berries, plants, stuffed animals, whereas the Caucasian is using hunting type spiritual devices, guns, hammers, mathematical. For the African child, when it comes to faces, family, and environment, for the Caucasian child, face to face while sitting with parent. Now, when it comes to beating for the African child, none. The child is too young to understand the purpose. Only 14 months or older. But when it comes to the Caucasian child, when it comes to beating, the parents are slapping the infants. Now, when it comes to food for the African child, that would be raw grape or orange juice powder herb at 3 months. No digestive problems. When it comes to the Caucasian child, when it comes to food, mostly cooked or raw cereal, pastry, cow's milk. And then the child will have indigestion, burping, drooling, nose dripping, mucus, requires patting on the back after feeding to relieve indigestion. Okay, and for the African child, when it comes to sensor motor and psychomotor skills, 12 months or less indicates hunger and sound, cooing and whimper. For the Caucasian child, 2 to 3 years or more, the child will cry to indicate they have an issue. Now let's look at the book African Holistic Health. This is page 303. This is a lot of differences here. You could pretty much just take a look at it, but everything is pretty much different. From the blood, the liver, the hair, alcohol, eyes, nose, everything is different here. And on page 304, they go even further, talk about the voice, the ears, the stomach, the sexual parts. The list goes on. Many differences here. On page 511, it talks about the European defeating ancient Africa with diseases. And, he kind of goes in on the different diseases that the so-called European, brought to Africa. Now, this book is titled African People and European Holidays, A Mental Genocide by Ashakamusa Barashango. And I'm going to actually read this part here because, again, this is going to tie into my conclusion. At their first Thanksgiving celebration in 1621, there was only 6 or 7 sane people left in the whole Pilgrim colony. The rest were mentally deranged. In other words, putting it into modern everyday language, the bulk of them were just plain crazy. Pilgrim cannibalism. Captain John Smith wrote, So great was our famine that a savage we slew and buried. The poorer sort took him up again and ate him, and so did divers. Once another's boiled and stewed with herbs, and one amongst the rest did kill his wife, powdered her, and had eaten part of her. This is from the book, The General History of Virginia, 4th book, page 294. Okay. And now I want to look at the book, Everything You Know Is Wrong, and that's written by Lloyd Pye. I'm going to actually read this part here. It's very important. It says in part 2, we have learned that after 4 million years of supposed evolution, the ultimate distillation of pre-human development was the heavy-boned, massively muscled, rather dim-witted brutes called Neanderthals, who apart from upright posture, bear no physical relationship to modern humans. Very important. That means there is no legitimate way to connect humanity to Earth's remote past. That means Darwinism does not, cannot, and never will explain how mankind got here. This is a powerful statement most scientists would prefer the general public never hear, much less understand. Also realize that it opens some unusual avenues of inquiry along very non-traditional lines. For example, if humanity did not evolve here on Earth, how on earth did we get here? And if Neanderthals and early hominid types are the true native population on planet Earth, why and how and when did all of them go extinct? Better yet, did all of them go extinct? This is where the hominids come in. Now we're going to look at the last book that I want to reference. And this is the book, African People and European Holidays and Mental Genocide, page 28 to 29. Alright, so it says the Scythian disease. It says in the capitalized sketch of the Scythians, who were the progeny of the white Cro-Magnon and the ancestors of Hitler's Aryan race, we are presenting a case study of the manifest abysmal gap between the African and the Caucasian who later invaded and inhabited East, West, Central, and Southern Europe, with the hope that you will not accuse us of being racial bigots teaching hatred. We are basing the following remarks on one white man's view of his own ancestry, a Greek geographer and historian of the 5th century BCE named Herodotus. The Scythians were a branch of the Caucasian race from the far northeast of the Asian continent and parts of northern Europe. They referred to themselves as being the youngest of all the nations in the ancient world, having emerged on the scene somewhere between 2000 to 1500 BCE. According to one Scythian tradition, they descended from a cave-dwelling viper woman, a horrid creature with the head and torso of a woman from the waist up and the venom-laden body of a snake from the buttocks down. It's really weird that out of all the words that could have a typo, he had a typo with the word snake. It's ridiculous. But it says shake there, but it's supposed to be snake. Anyhow, the story goes on to tell how she once tricked an Egyptian named Hercules. It goes on and on. Let me go to the juicy part here. Where we want to go. So Herodotus says they were the most uncivilized nation in the world and sustained themselves by eating the raw flesh of their cattle. In fact, the eating of rare beef is still a big thing with the descendants here in America today. The rarer, the bloodier it is, the better they like it. The Scythians also abhorred the use of water for bathing. Instead, they basked themselves in the vapors of burning hemp, from which they would derive a narcotic high. Herodotus further depicts them as violent, warlike nomads devoid in the science of agriculture who traveled and lived in wagons. These early predecessors of today's arrogant Euro-Americans rode into combat wearing black capes and fell upon their victims with vampire-like fury, sucking the blood from the body of the first person they killed in battle. It was also customary to scalp their fallen enemy and drink the blood. Alright, so my personal opinion on where white people came from, based on the information that I have in this video, and information that I didn't even bother to put in the video. They are obviously not humans, and they were not created here, okay? We spoke about Rh negative blood, how everyone is Rh positive, but all of a sudden you have a group of so-called Caucasians that are Rh negative, right? We talk about their common ancestors being Neanderthals. We talk about their makeup, their anatomy being sulfur-based. We talk about Vlad the Impaler. We've just spoken about the Scythians. Obviously, their ancestors were hybrids. They were reptilians. They were savages, okay? They know this, and this is why, you try to talk to white folks about their ancestors. They say we're all humans. They say they came from Africa. No, you didn't come from Africa, okay? Again, we can look at the book African Holistic Health. It talks about the differences between blacks and whites. And again, I'm just using that term, but you know what I mean. But Europeans and Aboriginals is completely different, okay? The diet, the phenotypes, the physiology, completely different. We spoke about what traits that Rh negative people have. I mean, the list goes on. Again, I have more information. I have video footage. I have news articles. I didn't even bother to include in this video because then it would be like a 2-hour video. That would be overkill. So that's my conclusion. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. Be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, Conspiracy Dude. So recently, Vivica Fox implied that 50 Cent was gay because of his comments about the show Empire and his pose on the XXL magazine with Soulja Boy. The question is Vivica Fox just seeking attention, or is she actually exposing 50 Cent?